So I started working on a video trying to power scale every single person in the Tournament of Power and compare them episode by episode. And I might still end up doing it, but oh my god. I've seen this kind of thing as a problem for a while now with Dragon Ball. And this kind of accentuated it for me and made me see how bad it really was at some points. Dragon Ball Super's power scaling is, to put it lightly, really, really stupid. There's a couple reasons why it's so convoluted and always has been like that. But as the series is going on, these problems are getting worse and worse, and nothing is rectified. Of course, me making a video is not going to do anything on it either, but I feel like it's fun to discuss. In a morbid kind of way. Oftentimes it's so egregious that I just personally say, wait, that's stupid, but also acknowledge that I can't refute it because that's just how it is. And it also got me to realize why arguments about power scaling get so heated. Specifically with Dragon Ball Super. It's not straightforward at all. So what actually goes into it? Why does it make no sense with Dragon Ball Super, and why is that important? Excuse the clickbaity title, but this video is going to be a constructive criticism of why Dragon Ball Super power scaling is just nonsensical at this point, as well as why it matters and how to fix it. I'm not here to bash power scalers or needlessly bash Dragon Ball Super, I'm just here to point out some flaws that you guys might also look at and say, oh yeah, that's kind of weird. So yeah, it's not the power scalers, but rather what they're power scaling, and how power scaling for Dragon Ball, it's hell. Let's start with one of the weirdest problems, and this isn't exclusive to Dragon Ball either, but there's multiple continuities to Dragon Ball Super. This isn't a huge issue because most people know, oh hey, these are different versions. But some people don't realize that. Which is fine because they give us 3 different continuities here. Of course, someone who's not power scaling all day is going to look at that and be like, oh, it's all the same. There's the anime, there's the manga, and then probably the worst one of them all, the movies. Because the movies just seem so completely detached from everything. So much so that they only ever want to reference the Tournament of Power and nothing specific about it. Or previous movies. I don't really need to explain why this causes some confusion, because it's pretty obvious. Each story plays out differently. The anime has its own version of events, the manga has its own version of events, and the movies have their own version of events that we don't even really get to see. So we might not specifically know how things went down. And the funniest part to me is these are all separate continuities, but they're also all connected. Everything happens. It's just they play out slightly differently. Look at Superhero, for example. It doesn't acknowledge Moro or Granola at all, which you think it would. It actually references Jiren, an antagonist from like 3 arcs ago. But the movie clearly happens after both those events in the manga. And all we get from that is an interview from outside of the actual series. I don't want to go too much into a rabbit hole about the continuities, but yeah, it causes an issue with power scaling. Let's actually talk about some more specific issues with it though. I think one of the biggest parts of this is the fact that everyone grows so absurdly quickly. This isn't recent either. This happened all the way back in Battle of Gods 2, which is funny because that's technically Dragon Ball Z. This was the first instance of an egregious boost in power. Battle of Gods God Goku scales to such a high level that it makes all the other arcs before it, well, they look like nothing in comparison. And it's even crazier when you consider the fact that by the time Resurrection F rolls around, they've basically got that power in their base. And they could transform into Super Saiyan Blue on top of that. And I think I got a perfect example for this. I've touched upon this before myself, and a couple others have too, and it's completely stupid, but logically, this makes sense if you scale everyone this way. Kaba, in base, could solo the entire Buu saga, probably with ease too. Again, this is one of those things that I think is completely stupid, but I acknowledge it as a fact because this is just how it seems to be. Here, let me break it down. Kaba was contending pretty well with Vegeta in the tournament. Vegeta even says that their base powers are about even, and this is something that happens in both versions too, which means it's something that Toriyama probably included himself. It's consistent between both, and he probably wanted to make it a point that, yeah, Kaba's as strong as Vegeta in base. Now you're probably thinking, what's the big deal? Well, if you power scaled Dragon Ball Super before, you know what the big deal is. You've probably seen this before too, but let's look at this further. Base Vegeta just trained 3 years in the Room of Spirit and Time, and before entering the Room of Spirit and Time, he was stronger than he was in Resurrection F. Base Goku and Vegeta in Resurrection F are seemingly stronger than Battle of Gods God Goku. And Battle of Gods God Goku is also leaps and bounds above Vegito, Super Buu. Pretty much everyone in the Buu saga is fodder for him. He stated that fusion wouldn't do anything against Beerus and it wouldn't even be considered viable. Of course, yeah, God Goku didn't defeat Beerus, but the pretty obvious implication here is that God Goku, in this form alone, it's more useful than fusing into Vegito. And even crazier if you want to highball it, you could say Goku was probably even considering the implications of a Super Saiyan 3 Vegito or Super Saiyan 2. But even if you lowball it and you try to go about this in the lowest way possible, this is how absurd the scaling is. It makes it seem like base Kaba is so many times stronger than anyone in the Buu saga. And I'm gonna say this again so I get the point across. I think this is stupid. I'm not pushing some sort of agenda. People have gotten mad at me before for saying that, and I'm not pushing some sort of agenda. It's just that this seems to be the way it is. And I don't blame people for thinking that this is stupid and that they don't like this. I can completely get why someone wouldn't want to believe this. And this is one example out of many. Going back to the whole reason I made this video, if you look at the Tournament of Power, like, oh my god, I'm gonna break this down whenever I make that video if I eventually do come around to it. But after discussing it a bit with my friends and even some other people, it finally hit me how truly ridiculous the power scale was in the Tournament of Power. Within the course of like 48 minutes, all these people, mainly Goku and Vegeta, they grew so much absurdly stronger than they were before. they surpass themselves multiple times, to the point where I've seen actually viable arguments that, listen to how crazy this sounds, base Goku from the end of the tournament in power, he's probably much stronger than Vegeta Blue from the previous arc. Another instance of something that's just absurd and something that I don't really like, but something that I can't really argue with because the arguments I hear for it are pretty sound. I can make a whole other video about these insane examples, but I just wanted to include a few here just to show you. Oh my god, it is crazy. But one thing about those examples and other ones that I'm kind of referring to, they have actual statements backing them up. Or longer fights, something like that. Something that actually gives evidence to some sort of power scaling argument. In contrast to that, there's another crazy problem. Power scaling being too vague. I think a perfect example of this is Superhero. For the record, I love Superhero, and like I said at the beginning of this video, I'm not using this video to just shit on Dragon Ball Super, I'm just pointing out some issues, but in terms of power scaling, it's almost like this movie exists in a vacuum. Like, yeah, there's obvious things like Gamma 2's stronger than Piccolo, but then Orange Piccolo's stronger than him, or Beast Gohan is so absurdly powerful that he kills Cell Max easily. Yeah, it's pretty obvious like that, but when you try to compare it to stuff outside of the movie, it's kind of weird. Here's the info we know. This movie takes place after the Granola arc. Kind of strange because, again, the Granola arc never happened in the anime, so we don't know exactly how the events went down in this continuity, but okay, whatever. We know everyone's stronger than the previous arcs. And then we just get really vague statements about the Gammas and Cell Max and Piccolo. The Gammas, for example. We got a statement saying they can compete with Goku and Vegeta, and Piccolo says the Gammas' powers are on par with Goku and Vegeta. But like, what? Is this talking about them at their full power? You could argue that it's not, because Piccolo wouldn't know what Goku's full power is since he can't really sense that. He can't sense the androids either. And also, what Goku and Vegeta are we talking about? The Red Ribbon Army would have no data about what happened in the Granola arc. They would know what happened in the Moro arc, at least when Moro came to Earth. So maybe they have Goku's power at Ultra Instinct at that point in time. So when they said they can compete with Goku and Vegeta, what does that mean? Can they kill current Goku and Vegeta? Can they just compete with Moro arc Goku and Vegeta? Can they completely defeat them back then, or can they just fight alongside them? And the whole movie's like this too. Piccolo then says the same thing about Cell Max. They don't know if they would win even if Goku and Vegeta were there. Another incredibly vague statement, and one that's not even really too different from the Gammas. And then there's Toriyama's statement about Orange Piccolo, saying he has power on par with Goku and co. Logically, he's definitely talking about a higher end of Goku's power and such. But how high are we talking? Blue? Blue Kaioken? Ultra Instinct? True Ultra Instinct? We can assume, but we'll never actually know 100% for sure. At least not yet. And then we also have a bunch of promo material that hypes up different characters. Every time a new movie or an anime or whatever comes out, some new character is being touted as the strongest around. And yeah, it's fine to use this as evidence in power scaling, but sometimes these promo statements kind of embellish things or they just contradict each other completely, so it's a really weird thing. So those are the issues that I've noticed, and I do want to keep this video kind of brief. I could go into more depth about it, but point being, those issues are there. And another perfectly valid question is, why does that even matter? Why does it matter that Dragon Ball Super has these huge leaps in power? And why does it matter that this isn't as clear-cut as it could be? Some may say that's part of the fun, and yeah, part of the fun in debating this is how arguable it is. Nothing is clear-cut, and at the end of the day, it's not too important how strong some fictional character is. But I think in the sense Dragon Ball is a bit different. For a battle shonen where strength is such an important factor in the story and not just a fun little side note, a more consistent scale with better explanations behind it could really be helpful. Nowadays it just feels like people get a new transformation and they use that as a new gauge of power. There's less reliance on technique and actual strength. It does show at some points, but it feels more like flashiness takes precedence. And even when we have times where techniques are introduced, a lot of the times they are correlated with strength in some way. Or strength at least plays a pretty crucial role in how that power is used. Dragon Ball has made it a point in the past that strength isn't everything, and that still does show in the series from time to time. But one of my issues with Super is the fact that it's getting away from that idea. More and more it seems like strength is everything, or at the very least, strength is correlated with every new thing introduced. Look at the Granola arc, for example. So much of that was focused on the strongest of the universe. Granted, in that arc, it's a little easier to scale people because of that, but that's because it's blatantly spoon-fed and it's a plot point. The only time we're getting a more clear-cut example is when it's actually a crucial theme in the arc. And let's be honest too, the fact that those wishes were even possible is a whole other discussion, but still, why? Dragon Ball Super focuses so much on strength in some aspects, but at the same time, it doesn't focus on it enough in others. What explanations do we have behind this strength? And where's the consistency? Why is it all so vague? It's a weird paradox. There's too much emphasis on it, but also not enough. We have some arcs with crazy leaps in power, and some where there's not really massive change. In my opinion, the Future Trunks arc and the Moro arc actually handle this pretty well, at least outside of Goku Black's crazy growth. It all comes down to what the plot demands at the time, which would be okay if there was some sort of logic or explanation behind it. But hey, while we're being honest here, I know a lot of people don't really mind it that way, and that even includes me sometimes. Especially recently, I've noticed a mindset in the community, not just with Dragon Ball, but with everything, where rawness trumps all. Is it really that big of an issue? If you're not power scaling constantly, or trying to keep up with all the intricacies in the series, then it probably isn't an issue. Like I said before, at the end of the day, I'm just talking about how strong some fictional character is. But is there a better way to go about this? Most likely, yeah, there is. I don't want to end the video on a negative note, I want to be positive about it. And if you like this discussion video, you'll probably like my last one where I'm talking about Gohan, Frieza, and Piccolo, and going a little bit more in depth about their power scaling and how broken they are. And I know power scaling discussions get kind of heated, so keep it civil. What are your thoughts on how the series has been handling this? Hopefully you enjoyed this one though, and I'll see you on the next video.